Hello, everyone, and welcome to our WBCSD virtual session on building resilience in vital supply chains. This is Diane Holdorf. I see that we still have a lot of people joining us, so I will give us just a few minutes while more participants continue to join, and then we'll start. Thank you for being here. It's really great to have so many of you joining us here today for our WBCSD session on building resilience in vital supply chains. While we still have a number of people who are joining, I think I'll go ahead and start given our timing. So again, welcome. It's great to have you here with us today. I'm Diane Holdorf. I'm the Managing Director of our Food and Nature program here at WBCSD. And as the next few slides, I'll just share a little bit more of information on our program and the work that we're doing, how it relates to COVID, and the work that we have broadly in this area. But the first thing I thought I would do is acknowledge that today is an important day. Today's Earth Day. And, you know, the urgency has never been greater. We are seeing not just an environmental emergency and a climate breakdown, but now really coming to life this huge health risk and pandemic through COVID-19. So we are really feeling the need, the opportunity, and frankly, the obligation to be working at the intersection of these issues as we continue to go forward. So just acknowledging Earth Day and wishing all of you a very good one. It's such an important day for us to reflect and then get even more focused on the work we have to do together going forward. This session is being recorded. You will have seen that when you come in. Importantly, we will be able to use that recording as a follow-up for all of you who are here. You are all muted, but we do want to be able to engage and have this be a great discussion today. So please use the chat function. I imagine many of you are very used to working on Zoom at this point, but what you'll see is a chat function in your toolbar under More. Please feel free to click on that and use that, sharing with all or each other chats that you would like to inform us of. If you've got something you'd like to say, please raise your hand using that raise your hand code. We've got people watching both the chats and for that. We're also going to be seeking your input today, and we are going to be sharing that as we go through. So in order for us to prepare for that, I'd like you to please use your phone or your computer, either one, to get Mentimeter ready to go. Please open up menti.com and enter this code here. It is the code that we will be using for all of our questions that we'll be asking you today. So code 819703 will be the one to get you going. So all of our slides will be shared afterwards. As always, we are working in a pre-competitive environment, so we always share our antitrust statement. Please remember that this is not a place where we're going to be getting into any conversations around pricing or bid strategies or customers. If we sense anything in the chat or anything that comes up in our conversation, we will quickly shut that down. It's not appropriate for what it is we're trying to do here together. WBCSD is something that is an organization that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, but we are really focused on ensuring that business leadership is setting the pace for a sustainable future. With more than 200 companies, we've got work focused on how we truly create a world where 9 billion people are living well and within planetary boundaries by 2050. And again, the timing for this just couldn't be more urgent. We are so happy to welcome all of our members who are here today. You'll see many of our 200 company members here, but equally our partners, so important to have you working with us, and our global network partners as well. It's, you know, we only can do this through this type of joint and collective action, and we're pleased to have everybody here. Thank you for noting the code for Menti. We will be sharing it again, but perhaps one of my team members could also put it into the chat so that we have that ready to go. WBCSD is doing our work in 6 really large interconnected systems. We work in circular economy, cities and mobility, climate and energy, people, redefining value, and food and nature. And as we've set up our COVID response projects, they, like our other programmatic work, span these big system areas and are very connected. The work that we're going to be talking about today is focused on vital supply chains, and we're starting our vital supply chains work in food and nature. But clearly, we'll talk about why they are all connected to these other big vital supply chains as well. Within the Food and Nature program, for those who aren't as familiar with it, we wanted to share with you the 3 program areas that we have. We have a big program area on food and agriculture, where we're working on both making agriculture a solution for climate, nature, people, nutrition, and health, and how that all goes through into consumption for healthy and sustainable diets, lifting through our FRESH program into the work that we do there. And because of the scale of our member and partner capacity, we are choosing to focus on vital supply chains first and foremost in assuring food system security. But equally, there's really important work connecting our supply chains in our nature action work and in the work that we do on water. Cutting across all of this is the work we do on policy and advocacy and on finance mobilization. Without working on those things, we can't be lifting the collective action and impact of our work really to its greatest point. So this gives you a very quick overview of our work in the Food and Nature program and how what we're going to be talking today is grounded in that work. This is the start also of our virtual events. Many of you will have known that we should have been meeting in Montreux for our liaison delegate sessions this week. Instead, we are proud to come together with the leadership of our events team to instead ensure that we can share this type of content and engagement virtually. So we're going to be sharing 2 sessions per week, this being one of 2 this week as our starting point. And those will be each Monday and Wednesday until July. Please visit our link here that you see to make sure that you can see what's coming up. And we'd love to have you join us for any of those other sessions as well. Today, we're going to have a bit more scene setting on why vital supply chains. We're going to get some great insight from McKinsey on the data behind why we need to be focusing on food system security. And then we'll be talking a lot about what it means to be responding on food system security in light of COVID and how that embeds into our other work. And then we'll wrap up our session. So this is the way that we'll be pursuing our time together today. But it's really coming together in these times of unprecedented disruption is something that we really couldn't even have predicted last year. We were looking at 2020 as a mega year for many reasons, but wow, has it proven to be even different than what we anticipated. I say this recognizing that the hope that you and your family members are all remaining safe in this time of COVID, but recognizing also that this means we have to rethink how we look at addressing this disruptive change as we move into the new normal. We have to rethink our social contract through stakeholder capitalism as business, what our role is and how we respond across borders, not just for normal business and whatever business as usual we will return to, but also in times of crisis, how we pick up and respond. We do that for our own communities, but for those that we serve, and we do it for the planet that we all share, because we are all connected across these economic systems. And we've seen more clearly than ever through these disruptions how important, but also how fragile our global supply chains are. We have to take that to be considering what are these new transition pathways? How do we really rethink the work to be done together? And that is where we're really happy to be spending some time with you together today. Building off of our regular program work, we've moved quickly as WBCSD together with many partners to say, what is the work that we have to stand up and take action on in face of COVID to really be thinking about this, Today, we will be going deep into the vital supply chains work, but we also have project work underway to what's it going to mean to return to the new normal? How can we as businesses help focus employee health when we think about what it will mean to return to more normal working conditions? How will we know that we're ready, and how will we support that transition? And what does it mean for financial and risk management as we look into business recovery? So we have a very big project combining both a focus on employee health and business recovery. And then as we look out towards this decade of action that we're supporting for the SDGs for 2030 and out towards Vision 2050, we have to be thinking about the long-term impacts. How will we know how to rethink this work? And so we've got work underway with our Vision 2050 project on what the long-term impacts of the COVID crisis are for our business planning and community support and stakeholder capitalism resilience efforts are as well. So we welcome you to all of that. Today, we're going to be focusing on vital supply chains. Food security has been in the news a lot, actually, and many of you are actively working in parts of our food, agriculture, and feed sectors, but certainly as consumers and as individuals, we're all affected by these concerns and disruptions within food security. So please, hopefully you've got Mentimeter set up. Using this code, we're going to create a word cloud now. We'd like to see what, from your view, are the biggest issues that we need to address. And this will inform our work going forward and will give us a great reference point as well as we start to move into the more detailed conversation here this morning. So it's great to see many of you are using Mentimeter and starting to put where you think the biggest risks are. This food cloud will continue to grow, but it's wonderful to see it starting to move right now. Food waste is obviously coming through as a huge issue. Many of you are seeing that in the work and in your daily lives, I'm sure, certainly in headlines. We're seeing conflict availability also start to pop with bigger focus, justice showing up, labor force and migrant work. Yes, these are themes that we've already seen as well. Agri-financing, trade barriers, logistics, governance, how we avoid hunger, how we assure resilience. What are we doing about inequity through this? Because we've never seen, well, never is a strong word. We are certainly seeing more than ever the impact of inequity on access and availability for food. Great, this is wonderful to see this work coming in. Please continue to build on this because this type of information, as I said, really helps us as we prioritize our work. And I love how these word clouds go. So this word cloud will continue to grow. We'll share the final with you as part of the final slides that we share after the session. But with this input, what I'm going to do now is move into this first section of sharing some data with you. And with that, I'd like to introduce Sarah Bodiger, who's a senior advisor with McKinsey. Sarah sits in the Global Ag program at McKinsey, as I'm sure will become really apparent as she shares with you the data that McKinsey's been gathering on where are we actually seeing these points that we have to address. And I'd also like to take this moment to really welcome McKinsey as well as a new WBCSD member. It's great to have you here. Sarah, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. And with this, I will drive, but I will hand it over to you and I'll ask you to take us through the data that you've been putting together. Thanks, Sarah, for that grounding information.
Thank you.
And with that, we're going to turn into now what the work is to be done. How do we link the data that Sarah's been sharing with what you all are seeing on the ground? The alignment to that word cloud was, I think, incredibly strong with the work that we've already had underway. Recognizing, of course, that there's a lot of movement in this space. So we have to do this together in partnership with others. And we'll speak to who we're working with in partnership as we continue through these slides. But just know that this isn't anything that any of us do alone. We all do this together. So the way that we start to think about addressing the most critical risks to the disruption of our food system, particularly either where we can share knowledge, like we've just done here today, to help inform the individual business steps and practices that we need to take in markets or for crops or for types of supply chains, as well as where can we be taking collective action, where if we do something together, we actually can have a faster result to either unstick or mitigate risk with what we're seeing in the disruptions. So we're going to talk about each of these 3 work streams that you see on the right side of your screen here in our next few slides, and continue to seek your input. We're going to share information about the Rapid Response Platform. We're going to talk about what this means to actually rebuild for a much more resilient recovery. This statement that we're hearing about build back better is critical, and resilience relative to the food system is going to be a key for us. And then where do we raise our voice, and how do we raise our voice together to really address the most critical issues? Yesterday, the G20 was meeting on food security. We've been sharing information together with partners like FOLU and the many who signed on to the call to action for world leaders in the light of those types of economic plans for recovery that are going on. We'll share more on that as we move into that part of the work that we're doing together as well. So when we started the Rapid Response Platform work, building from what we know through our work together with you in what we are our food and agricultural systems, we saw themes emerging on the production side and urgently themes developing on the consumption side as well. I think Sarah's done a great job outlining where the current truths lie and what the data is showing relative to export restrictions, the importance of open trade from a production standpoint for food, feed, and agricultural inputs. We've heard a lot around keeping lines open for people, however, as well, and particularly as we think about the planting seasons and harvest seasons, which are coming really to a point right now in many of our markets and crops, keeping migrant workforce moving to be able to help with labor requirements is critically important. And then there are countries for whom these vulnerabilities are just going to be so much higher, either because they depend so much on imports for food or because of general lack of stability across the economy. We're going to keep a sharp eye there. But as we turn to the consumption piece, Sarah, you touched on these emergency food needs. They are existing in every market today because we have more than half of all school children not in school. We've got so many people who aren't able to work because they can't work from home or because they've lost their jobs. That really accentuates the risks. And we're watching very carefully to see if this strange combination of the oil volatility and the harvest impacts and the logistics challenges have impacts on food pricing. And this logistics piece is going to be key across the whole chain, but particularly last mile delivery. How we get it to those who most need it is proving to be really challenging. And we're hearing some really interesting solutions already come from members who are using creative backhaul solutions to get product out. But this is the type of knowledge that we can share and the actions that we can think about taking together. But you all have your own space that you sit in, and we'd like to hear from you from a food production standpoint. What do you think are the 3 biggest challenges? We're going to have 3 sets of questions here. This first one is on food production. We're going to have one then on consumption, and we're going to have a third one on markets, because we want to leverage your views, your visibility, and your knowledge to help inform our work in this rapid response recovery piece. So hopefully you're in Mentimeter going to that first question on production. The code is still in the chat and on the screen, and we're starting to see this come up. So logistics are really having a big point. Cash flow to farmers. We heard a lot from Sarah on what we need to be doing on SME and smallholder, frankly, any farmer. Cash flow in these times is going to be critical. System vulnerability is also key. Less we're seeing on the logistics and storage. So perhaps we're getting more of a sense of that being landed from a control standpoint and a solution standpoint in some of these markets. we certainly don't see as big a risk as we probably would have done 3 weeks ago on open trade, as we've seen successful border controls left open so that things can be moving across markets. Okay, so this is great. This helps us really think through, where do we focus our next steps? Let me share my screen back again, and we're going to go to the next question. Again, we'll be keeping all of these in our notes from the meeting so that we can use it to both share with you when we share the results, and to inform our next steps for how we prioritize these collective actions that we'll take together. So now we've got some questions in there for you on food consumption. Pick the top 3 areas where you think, from a collective action standpoint, I mean, all of these issues are, of course, really important right now, but where do you think we should be focusing for our collective action together as businesses, as global network partners, and as partners to try to take that action? Let's see what we've got coming in. Demand changes. Yeah, I've heard a lot from the consumer-facing companies that demand planning has shifted dramatically, and they're working hard to ensure that demand planning moves into changing production plans. Household income loss and the impact on nutrition is going to be key. What's some of the work that we can do there together as we think about the food supply? Affordability as well. Affordability and availability are going to be key to us as we think through where are perhaps these priority areas or priority supplies that we need to be focusing on. So we're seeing general agreement across many of these that they're all going to be important. This is, I think, Sarah, you were saying this is one of the areas of the biggest shock, fastest coming in, is loss of income and access to food. And so good, this helps us really think through, how do we focus on that work that we can do together? The third question, let me go to that now. We want to get your feedback. Which markets or which value chains do you see that are going to require the most urgent collective action? Now, this is free. You see, you can put anything in here that you want. We felt if we pre-populated it, we might not hit everything that was going to be important from what you were seeing. And we wanted to make sure that we could really leverage the parts of the world that you sit in and the parts of the value chain that you sit in to get the fastest input. So we should see several things starting to scroll in here. Developing markets are going to be key. When we talked about vulnerability, making sure that we're, we've got, like Sarah was saying, the locust impacts in East Africa. We have many countries who rely heavily on imports. The lockdowns are affecting countries very differently as governments take different types of actions. So we're seeing a different types of needs there. We're seeing fruit, rice, veg, perishables. These are all, we know, especially as we think about harvest timing and access to market and cold chain storage, really, really critical in how we think about this. Apparel is one too that, we have to remember that agriculture is more than just food. So how are we thinking about these different aspects? Basic nourishment, smallholder farm security. Great. This is really important input to us as we continue working through prioritization. We're going to have follow-up meetings in the next week together with members and partners, where this type of information, together with what we've already gathered, will definitely start to feed into where we want to prioritize our collective action steps, but equally where we want to dive deeper on perhaps some data analysis and market analysis to get information that will be useful for all of you. So thank you so much for what you've been putting into this. Remember that all of this will be shared with you as part of our follow-up. So that's super helpful information. That's all information that goes into our rapid response project, but it is absolutely a critical component to feed in as well to what it means to recover. What does a healthy and resilient recovery look like? Hopefully many of you will have seen the CEO Guide to Food System Security that we published last year. And that allowed us to lay out transformation pathways where business can lead, knowing that we can't successfully transform food systems for healthy people and a healthy planet without addressing nutrition and health, without addressing livelihoods and equity and human rights across the value chain, certainly without thinking about climate, both resilience and adaptation, and moving into agriculture being a solution in the climate space, and equally nature, and how we use this to really mitigate nature loss and move into regenerative practices. But one thing we didn't have on our radar, and this is true of so many, was this result of pandemic crisis demonstrating these weakest links in our value chains. As you were just pointing out, many of those issues are short-term. Right now, we have to take action, but we also have to learn from those. We've got to change the way we're thinking about enterprise risk management. We have to think about the dynamic nature of managing in a new normal, which will be inherently more dependent on crisis response than we've had in the recent past, and think about how the new normal of COVID-19 creates the blueprint for resilient success. So this is work that will be moving forward starting within the next 2 weeks. And it connects into a lot of work underway with others. We want to create this really as a theme of work focusing on a better future together. And there's reasons for this to be super important to business. We often think about it from a risk standpoint, and we're seeing huge risks right now. We've got sectors that may never recover. And the food system, certainly everybody in the food and ag sector is under tremendous but different types of pressures than we were prepared for before. But equally, there's opportunities in here. We have the opportunity to demonstrate what it looks like when we do this together and show up and do our part, that we can create a different type of business leadership than what we've even had in the past. We're so proud of so many of our WBCSD members. We're going to talk about how we're showcasing some of your work here in a moment. But it matters to be able to show the positive types of responses that demonstrate what the future can really look like and how it can be differently. And we love this Edelman Trust Barometer special edition on COVID that talks about why that is so important. So this will also frame where the opportunity sits in many cases as we look to this blueprint for recovery. We'd like to hear from you though again. We know that when we think about recovery and the opportunities and risks, there's a lot that we need to be really focusing on for building back better. So one final opportunity for us here, other than in the chat boxes, to get your input here. I know that in some cases using Mentimeter is taking the place of what is normally a pretty robust chat box when we have these sessions. So, great to see your responses in here. And then please continue to share your thoughts. What are you seeing? What apps work for you? What sites are providing great interest? What do you know that we should be paying attention to? Please, this is important here, but put that in the chat box as well. So these issues and risks to build back better: nutrition, livelihoods and equity. That's going to be so, so important. We know that already. We're seeing equally focus on natural habitats and biodiversity and how we safeguard nature. Think about our regenerative practices as we build back. How we go back and strengthen local food systems. I mean, our global food systems, these global value chains are incredibly efficient, but this has shown out some of the risks, and we've seen quick responses in many markets that have the capacity to build into local food systems again. So how we continue to focus on that and strengthen on that is going to be good. How we really think about sustainable land use is going to be critically important. So great to see your input here. We really appreciate this. This absolutely helps us as we think about how we continue to build our next steps. And as I've said before, we're going to include all of these final inputs in our slides that we'll share, and it will be definitely part of how we inform our next steps. Great to see some comments coming into the chat. Thank you so much for that. So how we prioritize avoiding a situation like this again? Absolutely. I thought That was probably so inherent that I didn't say it out loud. But it's not just how we prepare for living in the new normal. It's how do we think about this intersection of health, climate, nature, and these interconnected systems and supply chains that we have to plan for in very different ways going forward. Great to have that input. Please continue to share in the chat box, and we'll keep an eye on that. This third part of the work that we're going to do under vital supply chains, as we start with our focus on food system security, recognizing, of course, as I've said, there are other vital supply chains that we need to be paying attention to. And as we think about the risk management aspects of this, we'll be looking at that broadly across vital supply chains. But here, with our starting point going deep on food system security, we have to begin thinking about how we lift up our voice together. So having a collective action coalition that builds on the policy and action leadership that we already have on nature and on food and on climate, how we now lead that into talking about this for the COVID relevant world and food system security, how we demonstrate the business leadership, and how we leverage these different types of media to raise these business voices and the calls to action that as partners across the value chain we can do together is the work that we've started, but certainly that we have more to do on. I wanted to call your attention to a few things that we've already done in this space because it's never too late to amplify, and there's really key messages in here that we should be leading on. We have had such a great point of input from Sarah at McKinsey with the data that she shared and the work that we've started and the input from all of you on where these priorities are. We know that we're in a race against time in many of these situations. And in fact, some of you may have seen the Guardian's point this morning with the article from the World Food Program on exactly how urgent they see this crisis to be. The global leaders are starting to build out their plans, and the time is now to influence those. Working together with our partners at FOLU and many leaders who signed on to a statement that we published on March 9th with a call to action for those leaders, we've repurposed that again, knowing the G20 was meeting this week to talk about food security. If you've not had a chance to see on FOLU's site or on our WBCSD webpage those specific themes, please go in and take a look at them because there's some great information in there to help us drive consistency, certainly in our messaging that we're doing together, but perhaps in the work that you have as well. There's also broader work underway around what does it mean to build back better for our planet and to address this health pandemic. There's increasingly themes coming through on how connected these are, and the science is demonstrating more and more of that. We're going to be sharing that in how we talk about this interconnection. As we've got the point here, finding the simple way, Simon, thank you, to show that interconnectedness and really demonstrate why, if we don't do these things jointly, we are surely set up for more of these types of pandemics. And as Carlos was saying, of course, it's a priority to avoid those. So this advocacy work is incredibly important, and we hope that you will join us in this. Certainly take a look at what's been happening so far. And it's a great focus on what companies have already been doing. We've got over 120 members where we've been able to lift up your stories on our website and say, here's what great response looks like. Here's the actions that we're already taking. And here's examples that where we can learn from each other and start to pool our ideas on how we work these things forward. It's been great because we've had a lot of media outreach on what does it mean, what's business doing, and we've been able to send them right here to our landing page of our website and share so much of what all of you are doing. So please, as your companies and through your partnerships, as you're taking different actions, we want to be able to continue to feature this. We want to continue to build on this. So continue to send us the work that you're doing in this place. And then how we get breakthrough is really, really important. You know, this is, there's so much in the news every day on the crisis that we almost aren't hearing about what are some of the things that we need to continue to be focusing on. So our work is part of a mixture of both. It's lifting up what we're already doing that is so relevant, but equally it's also around tailoring that into, through this collective action coalition work stream, the narrative that we want to bring forward. We heard from Sarah that some of the concerns through headlines about export bans maybe aren't actually as big a crisis to ongoing food security in the near term as perhaps they are coming through as, if all of the information isn't happening. Do we want to have something to say about that? But equally, there is longer term risk there if we can't get to planting seasons because of migrant workforce limits. So, you know, we want to be able to lift up on these key points, and we'll be working together in this space to determine what our common narrative is, what key messages we want to bring forward collectively, and how we share those across the work that we all do. You know, the Edelman Barometer points out none of us can do this alone. That is true for partner companies, but equally it's true for platforms like ours. And we're really appreciative of the organizations who we have such respect for and with whom we partner already. We're really proud that David Nabarro is an advisor to all of our work on this. When we kicked off our food system security work for vital supply chains, David actually shared in person and then in our second session via video why this is so important. And he's got a great series of blogs that he's been putting out through his 4SD platform on how we should all be preparing and responding. Equally, UNDP and FAO are sharing really critical information, as is World Health Organization, on how should we all be thinking and preparing and aligning our actions. We're using that to feed into our work. But equally, I wanted to flag it for all of you because there's great research and resources there that we can pull in. And, you know, World Economic Forum has been doing a tremendous amount of effort as well in their COVID action platform. They've got some great work underway in vital supply chains as it relates to health. And in fact, because the World Economic Forum had a starting point around health, that helped reaffirm that for us, together with World Economic Forum, we should be focusing here on food systems through the work that we do under our Memorandum of Understanding together around the food actions. So each of these partners are really important. There's more that I haven't listed, and I haven't been able to speak yet to how we partner with each of them. But just know this is how we want to be thinking through our work. And equally, as we think about bringing our actions forward, it could be that we actually land some of those next steps with the work that our partners have underway already to make it faster, to accelerate, enhance, or drive urgency. So we will be working really towards what all of these, what the confluence of work is to make sure we're focusing on those right times. This is just an example of where we might be bringing some of these next steps. You know, we spoke about some of the great information that the FAO has been sharing, lots of information coming through regional hubs. We want to be able, as we prioritize our hotspots, to be thinking about where should we land that work and who are those key partners. Many of you are closer, perhaps, to who some of those really priority partners will be when it gets to the point of implementation. And we're going to be really interested in knowing your network and where you've seen great success for how we think about bringing this forward. We know we're all in this together, and that includes also consumers. And I'm looking at the chats, and I see, Edward, what you raised, and Guido, great that you reinforced it. Influencing consumer behavior and trends is going to be really, really important. How we think about this from a community standpoint and from a consumer standpoint, we know that building back better isn't just about the production side of the value chain. It's also around the consumption side of the value chain. How we rethink diets from supporting those healthy choices. How we think about nutrition when people don't have as much choice now and the role that we have to play there. How we think about the diversification of food options and how we diversify things that we can offer, the types of solutions we can bring forward. These are areas where we have work underway, and I know our FRESH project in particular is kicking off work on consumer behavior now that will feed into this kind of blueprint for recovery, as well as how we continue with thinking about the role for us in helping to support what it means to be able to be on the receiving end of great options. for affordability, for accessibility, for taste, and for nutrition. So great to see all of that in there. We know that that's broader than just food when we think about agriculture. So we'll be thinking about all of these together. But no matter what, we know we aren't going back to where we were before. We know that we need to address what these next steps will be. And while we know that agriculture has been a big focus, we need to really also be continuing to focus on sustainable value chains. And I just want to go back and make a nod to a comment that we had for Thelina in here around, we want to be building back better in ways that focus on solutions for the planet, solutions for climate, solutions for nature. This is going to be important, and it is inherently part of our thinking. Continue to bring those ideas forward to us, because it makes a difference in how we address what our action priority steps are. Social continuity is going to be a really key piece for us to think through. We will be working on those aspects together. Carlos, I see that you've shared an article from the New Yorker. Great to see us sharing those kinds of resources here. Thank you so much. Aldo, I'm just looking now at the chat that you've shared around addressing food system security as an integral component of our broader strategy. Absolutely. Thanks for reinforcing that point, because if we're not building it in to our work plans and inherent business strategy, it's nothing more than a Band-Aid. And that's actually the purpose of our work together. We have to really think about market access, technology, and what these different solutions are to move away from the types of unsustainable practices that we know are in fact contributors to the types of pandemic that we're addressing and dealing with now, that really in so many ways is absolutely unprecedented. So thanks. Continue to share these types of comments for everybody. Sharing where we see these is a really important part of our work together. We're going to be doing more of these types of sessions as well. This week, we've started with our 2, as we shared at the beginning of our session today. But please know that we've got a lot of additional content coming forward where we would love to continue to have your input and share knowledge and experience and best practice. You can use this link here on your slide, or you can get it from our WBCSD website to really continue to build on our creative and collaborative platform of work that we do together. You can see hopefully today the type of value that we've gained from the points that you've shared, both in Mentimeter feedback as well as in the chat sessions. And I wanted to share with you here some of the events coming up so that you can think about where there's most interest for you and where you can really bring your insights to informing this work. We'd love to have you joining us on these next steps as we get these sessions continuing to be scheduled through April into May, June, and July. So with that, we're going to be closing the session today. We've got a few additional minutes here. If you've got further input that you'd like to share, please let us know. I'd love to be able to use this chat session to continue to inform our conversation. Because of the fact that you've registered for this, you will be receiving all of the slides and a recording of the session that you can go back and refer to. We've got another session coming up this afternoon for members and partners in other time zones who couldn't get up or stay up late to join us here today. And remember, we do have these other projects underway as well. We'd love to have you participating with us. And with that, I'd like to say thank you. The most important thing for all of us always, we're centered on the health and safety of our families, the health and safety of our employees, and how we build back for the communities in which we operate, upon whom we depend, and who depend on us as well. So in these unprecedented times, as we think about how we take our actions now and build back better than ever, I want to thank you for the partnership and the work that we have together. Thanks all for joining us. Looking forward to our next steps as we take all of this into action. Thanks all. Take care.